Welcome to Parenting High Needs Children on YouTube. On this episode, I just wanted to talk about what it is like to parent a high needs child. This is probably something that a lot of people may be familiar with. And this is definitely one of the things that makes each of us different. And some of us will experience the same things, and some of us will experience different things. And that is part of what makes us unique as parents of high needs children. And that is also what makes our children unique as high needs children. There is a saying out there that if you know one autistic person, you know one autistic person, because the spectrum of autism is so broad that the symptoms and the signs of autism vary so greatly that you could meet multiple people with autism and you would not know they are the same because they are not the same. That's basically the same thing for children with high needs. And it's really not relevant to their type of diagnosis. It's just a matter of what their needs are and how they express their needs and what happens when their needs aren't being expressed or aren't being met, or when their responses to any particular situation that triggers them or causes a reaction or anything that stimulates, represses, agitates, like the list goes on, right? Today, I wanted to discuss that because this past weekend, we had an incident and it put me in a state where I had two choices. I could either become anxious and dysregulated myself, or I could choose to remain calm and handle the situation in a manner that would support all of us. And thankfully, I was able to keep my head, remain calm, and handle the situation. And now I will add the caveat that I understand not everyone can do that every time. And I also understand that I may not do that every time, and that is perfectly fine. The point being, we need to do that most of the time, the majority of the time. Losing our heads in certain situations does not serve. It doesn't help us and it doesn't help our children. And that's really what we need to be mindful of. And it can be very helpful to play out certain scenarios before they could happen, or may happen. And that way we know we would do or could do in those situations, hoping that they never happen. And maybe they won't happen. So back to the story. Over the weekend, we went shopping, and I say in the city because we live in small town USA, and we don't have much in the way of shopping here, unless you count Walmart, which I don't really count Walmart. So we went to the mall in this city, and we were in a store shopping for clothing. My teenager was with me, and my little one went with her dad to look at something. And the next thing I realize, he's yelling her name. Not uncommon. And then I hear her feet hitting the tile floor. And then I hear it stop, but I still hear him yelling her name. They weren't really that far away, but I don't hear her feet anymore. So my daughter and I go over to where they were, and he asks if she's with me, and she's not. And so then he is running through the clothes racks and yelling her name. So I start going through the clothes racks, which are way too close together. And of course, I have the stroller and I can't get between them. And it's just too tight and chaotic. And I'm trying to remain calm, calling her name. My teenager's calling her name and looking through the racks. And my husband asks the sales girl if she saw her go by. And she said no, she wasn't paying attention. And he tells her that she's got on a blue Mickey Mouse coat and she's got brown hair and might be about this tall. She hasn't seen her. He goes off and he's looking still, and I'm looking through the racks, and I know that she likes to hide inside the racks. So I'm trying to look underneath them. I'm trying to look between them, and it's kind of chaotic, very chaotic. And the three of us are looking. He runs out into the corridor in the mall and looks down the hall and doesn't see her. He comes back in. We're all scrambling. The salesperson has called somebody to ask for assistance. And she's trying to describe my child to the person on the phone, to which my husband did not give a very good description. So I stopped and she asks me if I'm mom. And I said yes. And I said, she's got short brown hair, about my length, maybe a little longer, brown eyes. I said black pants, pink shoes. And she's relaying all this to the person on the phone. And she's like, yes, she's white. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's probably important too. And I mean, maybe she wasn't white. That was pretty presumptuous, by the way. She's telling the person on the phone all this. And my husband is coming back in. He's gone outside twice. We're looking in the clothing racks. My other daughter has gone, and this is a huge store. It's huge. So I'm like, at this point, I'm like, she could be anywhere in this store. And she's super fast and sneaky. And she doesn't want caught and she thinks this is funny. So, long story short, my daughter is an eloper, which means she runs and she hides. And she's very fast when she doesn't want to be caught, which is every time. And she hates being in the stroller. She hates being restrained. She hates having her harness on. She hates having her wrist restraint on. She hates being held unless she wants to be held, but she's like 40 something pounds. So she gets heavy. So everybody knows she needs to be within arm's length and probably closer because she's going to sprint every time. And sure enough, she did. We keep combing the racks and we're looking, and I'm like, how far could she get? How fast is she? And my husband went outside for the third time into the corridor, and there happened to be a janitor standing there. And he asked him if he was looking for a little girl and said she went down the hall. And so my husband went down, and she had made it 3/4 of the way down to the main concourse of the mall. And the only thing that had stopped her was she found a gumball machine and was trying to get M&Ms. With no remorse, no concern, she asked her dad for a quarter when he caught up to her because she needed money for the gumball machine, the M&M machine. He brought her back into the store and he found her, and everybody was pleased that she wasn't lost, and that's great. But at the same time, it was my worst fear had come to light because I always fear this child's going to run off and get lost. Always fear this child will be lost. She absolutely has no concerns about strangers, about running away, about getting lost. None. She does not fear anything. She doesn't have any concerns. We've also, I mean, she's 4. She has autism. She has no worries in the world. We've tried explaining to her that she could be taken, she could be lost, and all of these things. None of them resonate with her. And that is not surprising at all. But it's one of those, how do we explain to her that this is not okay? And how do we get her to understand that she can't just do this all the time? She's been doing this since she was 2, or even younger, actually. The point she could start moving, she started getting away. But we've been trying to teach her that she can't just do that. And there was a point where I stopped going places with her because she does this. And I know that's not the answer. We can't just stay homebound because she runs off. But at the same time, it's extremely stressful to go anywhere with her because she runs off and because she sometimes acts out. But honestly, that's less of a concern for me at this point. I really don't care what other people think of me and my child in public, because that's what happened next. We put her in the stroller with the 5-point harness, and she lost her mind. 3 of us held her down in the stroller while we strapped her in, and she proceeded to lose her mind. And you would have thought the poor child was being harassed and probably worse, that I probably shouldn't say on a live podcast. But the point is, she's screaming bloody murder in the middle of this store. People everywhere are looking at us like we're crazy and hurting this child. She was not being hurt by any stretch, but she was being restrained and she hated it. But she can also get out of the 5-point harness. So we weren't really serving any purpose. But at this point, I don't care what people think anymore. And she's going to run off. She's going to get lost. And sure enough, she got out of the 5-point harness and tried to climb out of the stroller again. So basically, this is pointless at this point. There is no benefit to strapping her in, but it's worse if you don't attempt. It's very stressful and very complicated. And this is everywhere we go, anytime we go, all the time. And I mean, like, try going into a public restroom with this child. She climbs under the door and runs off. Or better yet, she opens the door with your pants down. Like, how super awesome is that? Uh, with no remorse at all. So yeah, I try not to take her with me if I have to use the restroom. And I really hope that I'm not alone with her if I have to use the restroom, because that never pans out well. But at any rate, I know situations like this are things that happen to a lot of us. And they're also things that keep us homebound. They are things that stop us from visiting family and friends. They are things that stop us from traveling. They are things that keep us from doing the things that we love. Situations like this are things that prevent us from living. And in all honesty, we can't live like this. It's not okay to stay homebound because your child is acting out or running away or any of those things. And I say that out of love because we have to teach our children at some point that they can't be running off and talking to strangers and all of those things. And yes, our high needs children may not really understand what all of that means. But on the flip side, keeping them homebound isn't going to show them what that means either. So we really aren't doing favors by staying in as much as we aren't doing favors by letting them run off. We have to find the happy medium and we have to find what works. If we can't figure that out, we need to find resources to help us figure that out. So, in the same respect, my next step is contacting a company to see if I am eligible for a appropriate stroller that will keep her in. And they have these. They have them for a lot of medical children. To that purpose, the medical strollers may be built different and maybe geared a little more toward like a wheelchair and designed to be used a little differently. But they also have high needs strollers that are geared toward autistic children, and they can carry a person up to 100 pounds. And they have high level straps that children can't undo. So my next step is to find out if we will be eligible for a stroller like this, because she gets herself out and she's unsafe. Just the same as I need to find out if she is eligible for a car seat strap or a different car seat, because she can unbuckle herself while we're driving. And if I stop every time she unbuckles herself, we're not going to make it very far, very fast. And it's very unsafe. And these are the perceptions and the things that I need to look at from my point of view. The things that she's doing that are unsafe. They're not something I can stay home because of, and they're not something I can ignore. So what are my options? What do I do next? Who do I contact? This is a small piece of the reason that I'm posting these videos on YouTube. The reason I started this podcast, the reason I started my group. This is my mission. This is my purpose. These are the reasons that I have started doing this all together. Because I'm on a mission to empower moms of high needs children by guiding them to advocate for their children, nurture themselves, and support their journey to become parents that they need to be. We can't do that if we're constantly holding ourselves back and holding our children back. We need to know what resources are available to us, how to advocate for our children, how to advocate for ourselves, and how to care for ourselves. We are our primary caregiver. We are their primary caregiver. And if we can't show up for us, we can never show up for them. And while I don't want to use a bunch of cliches that are so common, like use your own oxygen mask and all of those things commonly linked to self-care, that's what it boils down to. Who will take care of your child if you are not here? You may be the default parent. Maybe you're a solo parent. Solo parenting is being the primary parent when there is another parent in the room. And I think that happens quite a lot to many of us as default parents. You know, when you're still doing 90 to 100% of all the parenting, even though someone else is sitting there watching you do it. It's really unfortunate that we find ourselves in those positions. But that said, we need to have resources and we need to find ways to do these things. And as I raise two high needs children, I have found that knowing and finding those resources is challenging, but they are there and they are available, and we can get them if we know how. And I have made it my mission to support moms in doing so. If you have any questions, I really do hope you'll reach out because that is the reason that I am here. If you need anything further, please don't hesitate to ask. And I hope you will pass this along to anyone else who could use this information and let them know that there is support available. I have a free Facebook group, Navigating High Needs Parenting, that you are more than welcome to join, where you can ask questions, get support, and join other parents who are in similar situations. Thank you again for joining me. I hope you'll like and subscribe, and we'll see you soon.